This is from Robin. I was not able to have kids myself, so there was never a question of my needing an abortion. My son is adopted. His birth mother was only 15 when she got pregnant. I am glad my son's birth mother didn't have an abortion either. That is what was right for her, and ultimately, because of her love and generosity, her decision ended up being more than right for me too. But I stand firmly for each woman in Texas consulting her own conscience, the God of her own understanding, her own family, and her own doctor when she finds out she is expecting. No woman should have to consult with the Texas legislature over something so intensely personal, so life-altering, and so spiritual. Politics is not everything. Some decisions are too important for politics. The life of a child is one of those things. So I ask you to stay real steady in fighting for the right of every woman to choose the path that is best for her according to her own values and ideals and dreams. Some women dream of having a child. Some dream of having a child later. Some women dream of being free from children so they can lift their family out of poverty, so they can go to or finish school. Some women are just too young to have their own children and don't have a family or a church who will pay for the child and help. Texas needs to go forward toward the future, not backward. A supporter who cares about all women and not just the ones who agree with me. Robin. This is from Patricia. Nearly 21 years ago, I determined that I was pregnant. I had lost the love of my life many months before and was a little bit crazy, which led to the pregnancy. My first option was to schedule an abortion, which I did. Upon further contemplation, I decided that I could support the child and I wanted to do so. I was 39 years old at the time. I was concerned about potential issues related to my age, so I had a lot of tests done and decided to have the child. It was my decision and my decision alone. All of my family and friends supported me, but the important fact is that it was my decision. This is how it should be. My child and I made it. Every woman should have the opportunity to make the choice that's right for her. From Harold. I am old enough to remember when women were driven to seek unlawful and unsafe abortions, often suffering complications, and I clearly remember one death in my community. Women should have control of their bodies. The provisions to ensure safety for women are unnecessary and are there to limit access for those least able to negotiate the steps necessary to obtain what they need. Those who claim to want to decrease abortions have also hampered the ability to obtain information on birth control and family planning. They are hypocrites. This from someone who did not sign their name. With this bill, Republicans are setting this state back 60 years. I believe in a woman's right to make choices for her own body, ultimately a choice that would affect her, the child, and society as a whole for a lifetime. It saddens me to know that some poor woman, young or old, would be essentially priced out by the restrictions set forth in this bill. With a state as large as Texas, how can a woman receive fair, quality, equitable medical care? I can only imagine the costs associated with having to go to a surgery center for an abortion. Several years ago, my sister, a single parent of one, found herself facing an unplanned pregnancy. Although the decision was agonizing for her, she made the difficult choice to abort the fetus. While not in complete agreement, I did support her right to make that decision for her life and her future. So I was the one who took her to the clinic, held her hand, and supported her in the months that followed. I would have been devastated had that option not been available or affordable for her, or even worse, if our only other option would have been some back alley clinic. Oh, the mere thought of it right now brings me to tears. I urge each and every member of the Texas Senate to put aside their own personal agendas and do what their constituents desire and what is right for women, children, and society. And this from Brenda. I am a Christian and an adoptive mother. The only way I could become a mother was for another woman to give birth and unselfishly give me her baby. I was so blessed that someone made that sacrifice for me. However, with that said, I strongly feel that every woman should have the right to do what they feel is best for themselves. Having an abortion is deeply personal and no one should have to answer to anyone but God. Since Rick Perry and David Dewhurst did not make the ultimate sacrifice for our sins, they have no right to tell anyone what they can and cannot do with their bodies. Women who choose to have an abortion should not be made to feel any worse than they already do by protesters, and they are entitled to good medical care, not second-rate clinics. When men can bear children, then they can make decisions on laws that would affect women. Thank you so much for standing up for women's rights. I will support you in every possible way. This from Joy in Fort Worth. I am shocked and appalled at the workings of the Texas legislature. To deny women the right to adequate health care while claiming to raise the standard of care for women is deceitful. I am so filled with concern for the plight of all women in the state of Texas, especially those who will now no longer have health services available to them, even those health services that some may find wrong. My mother worked in an abortion clinic for years. She worked with the women, mothers, daughters, husbands, and families that were faced with the choice of having to terminate a pregnancy. She believed strongly in what she did, and to this day says that the counseling work that she did there was the most rewarding and valuable work she ever did. The women who visited the clinic where she worked were often harassed on their way to the clinic to make what was undoubtedly a difficult and agonizing decision. What I learned from her experience there was that one should never judge the motives of another. One of the stories that my mom told me has always stuck with me. She had a young, devoutly religious couple visit her clinic. They already had a number of children and knew that they could not support anymore and had no family around that could assist them. During the counseling session, one of the two young couples told my mother that God would understand. It doesn't get more powerful or clear than that. So many of the decisions that we make in our lives are truly between God and us and nobody else. This is something that I have carried with me as a guiding principle all of my life. From Ellen, my birthday is January 22nd, and I'll be celebrating my 65th year. As I do every year, I also celebrate the day that Roe v. Wade was passed. This provided all women the ability to get a chance to make the personal choice about her body and her life. As a registered nurse, I have seen the results of backstreet abortions. We don't ever want to go back to those terrible days. I would never assume that I know what another person believes or wants, so neither does anyone know what is good for me or my family. I have a daughter and a granddaughter, and all I want for them is for them to have a choice with their physician to make the decision that is right for them. And this from Jessica in Arlington. As a person of deep faith, and I am enraged with the continuing war on women, especially when it comes to the banning of my health care dealing with abortions in Senate Bill 5. As a Christian, I believe all life is sacred. The Earth's population is over 7 billion people, and our planet is hurting. I grew up in the church. Members of my family are and have been leaders in the faith community. I was taught that the Bible talks about the oppression of women, yet the good news was told to them first. Protecting life does not start or end in the womb. Supporting family planning is fully pro-life. Unfortunately, too many members of the Senate do not recognize women's rights or women's reproductive health issues. Family planning is comprehensive sex education, female empowerment, education, adoption, contraception, and fostering parenting initiatives. In addition, it is also testing and treatment for STDs and cancer, which protects women's ability to have and care for children, and clinics do not need to be at a hospital level to be safe. Too much government control, limiting access to abortions only drives them underground and puts women and who they care for and their health at risk. If Governor Perry and others on the state legislature truly care about the health of its citizens, especially our sisters, mothers, grandmothers, daughters, and wives, they would have focused on expanding Medicaid, not restricting women's reproductive health, particularly when over half the births in Texas are paid by medical aid. Is this being good stewards of our state funds? Family planning is a way to reduce unwanted pregnancies and abortions, and it protects religious freedom. Harsh restrictions on abortion are stepping on women's constitutional rights to control their bodies. Like Senate Bill 5, many of us who are pro-choice want to work to reduce the number of abortions. We just can't have a fundamental part of our health be banned. Members of the state Senate, please stop the overreaching role of government in my life, my faith, and vote no on all of this bill. This is from Valletta. I find it ironic that on a day when we were learning from the Anna E. Casey Foundation that Texas once again ranks in the bottom 10 for child well-being, that the legislature was inserting themselves into the relationship between a woman and her doctor. Are there not enough challenges for the legislature? Is our education system fixed? Is our air clean? Are our roads totally smooth? I am old enough to remember what happened to women who did not get proper medical care. Every one of us today knows someone who's made the lonely drive to seek medical advice. The decision is not an easy one, as that person talks with her doctor, her loved one, her family, a friend, her faith leader, and yes, God. Why must the legislature insert politics and ignorance into these discussions? Why must rural and poor women disproportionately bear the greatest burden of the heavy weight of politics? I hope the legislature stands up to the pressure of a few and responds to the call of many. Reject the inaccuracies and the hate, and do not pass this legislation. This is from Andrea. We lost our 24-year-old niece who became pregnant, but after about 5 months, her body was rejecting the fetus. She was throwing blood clots for several days, but the hospital would not abort the fetus, claiming they did not know what was causing the difficulty. We ended up losing them both. We will never know if she could have been saved, but the option of expeditiously making that sort of painful decision should always be available to us, without our government legislators standing in the way. This being the most intimate of places between a woman and her doctor, and they have no right to force themselves into that private space, ever. From James. There should be no laws preventing access to medical care. Protect our God-given right to choose our destiny for ourselves. From Candy. There are so many stories from the days before abortions were legal and safe, as they should remain, because no matter how many laws are put on the books, women will always have abortions and have had for thousands of years. I have never been in the position to need or have an abortion, but I have way too many friends who have gone down that road, often because they were forced to have an abortion by their husbands or their parents. This was before birth control was readily available and abortions were legal. I have a friend who's 60 now. She got pregnant at 15. Her father brought a fireman home to perform her abortion in her bedroom. She never had children. I have another friend who was also pregnant as a teenager, whose father put her on a bus at the age of 15 with an address in New York City and told her not to come home until it was done. These are just a few of the many stories. The friend who got pregnant in the early 70s and because her parents had money was able to get on an airplane where she went to New York City where abortion was accessible. I don't know if she chose that abortion or if her parents did. The friend who got pregnant after her first sexual experience at 18 all went to New York, that liberal bastion. Thank God it was there, or who knows what would have happened to these women. College girls taken across the border in Mexico for their abortions. The list goes on and on. All this law will do is harm and prevent women from a safe abortion. It won't stop them from having one. The point is that abortion should be a choice made in private with a woman's doctor, not a choice made by a parent or a husband or a government. Because a government tells you that you must have a child can also be the government that will tell you you cannot have a child. And when that occurs, we become a place like China. From Paula. I don't have a story of personal loss or agony regarding choice. You see, I am a white, middle-class woman, and I have the freedom of choice that money provides. The proposed legislation is an assault on poor women. Probably most often, poor women of color. I feel a powerlessness in all of this, and that is when I don't feel the bile of disgust and anger welling up. But you know, I can't even begin to imagine how this feels to a young African American or Latino woman who is hearing this from old, white legislators. I ask you to speak my words, share my thoughts, and in some small way help me make a difference with this body of legislators who, despite their partisan leanings, have taken an oath to represent us, all of us, and vote our will, not theirs. From Robin. I had an abortion when I was 23. It was a horrible experience for me, but it was a necessary decision. I was able to do that because there were affordable clinics. I grew up going to Planned Parenthood and got my annual screenings and birth control. Please stay strong and speak for all of us women in Texas. I have been a nurse for over 40 years, and I now work in home health. I see on a daily basis what happens when poor, uninsured people don't have access to the health care that we all deserve. This one's not signed. The words freedom to choose summarize our position. My wife and I have 2 wonderful daughters and an adopted grandchild. If there were an unwanted pregnancy in our family, we would have serious reservations about choosing an abortion. However, it is a very personal choice, and we would never impose our views on our daughters or on strangers. Allowing abortions up to a reasonable time, e.g. 24 weeks, and at a large number of affordable, safe locations makes sense to us. We could afford to fly to another state if abortions were banned in Texas. However, many other families are less fortunate and would not have this option. Let us hope that the latest anti-abortion bill is not passed and that more reasonable viewpoints prevail in Austin. This is from someone named Robin. I was in Austin yesterday, came from D.C., but have to head back. I had an abortion in Houston a few years ago when my birth control failed due to antibiotics given after a surgery for cervical cancer. Because of health problems I've had, ovarian cysts, endometriosis, cervical cancer, and the surgeries I've had to treat them, carrying a pregnancy could be extremely dangerous both for me and for the fetus. Procedures to address my cervical cancer have compromised the strength of my cervix. Later in a pregnancy, it's possible my cervix wouldn't be able to hold a full uterus, but we couldn't know. If I had carried the pregnancy and developed complications, I would likely have had to abort in order to save my life and any possible future fertility. It would have been well past 20 weeks. My doctors have told me that any pregnancy for me will be very high risk. I was only 23, in a relationship with someone who didn't treat me very well, and far from any family emotional or financial support. Carrying that pregnancy just wasn't possible, and women who face those same complications don't only live in Houston, Austin, San Antonio, and Dallas. They live all over the state, in rural areas with limited contraception access and high rates of teen pregnancy. They live in Oklahoma and Louisiana, where the closest clinic by far is in Texas. All women need access to abortion, whether healthy or not, whether a rape victim or not, whether they have the financial resources to raise a child or not. Republicans would now tell me that I couldn't follow my doctor's advice. They should be ashamed of themselves for preaching about freedom from government intrusion while stepping quite literally between me and my doctor.